Everybody, it is Friday at 3:30 on April 24th, and I just finished up reading actually quite a few rough drafts from those of you that decided to take advantage of the opportunity to get feedback and submit a rough draft, even though it was optional. So I wanted to share a few things that I'm just noticing more of as trends and wanted to provide a little more insight to you all in terms of what will make your good paper great for your final health report when you turn it in on May 6th by 5 o'clock. So a few things. Let's just start from kind of the top of the paper. So when you write an abstract, and I know I shared with you a resource about how to write a good abstract a little while ago, but you want to make sure that your abstract tells your reader a little bit about each section of the paper. So you want to, for example, say the health disparity this paper discusses is this. These are some of the stats about the health disparity. Here's the population being affected. This is why this is happening. And then here are some recommendations. Kind of this abstract, they're very, very hard to write. I always write these last after I've written, the entire paper normally, because you want to tell the whole story, but in like a tiny little nutshell. So if you want examples, just go to Google Scholar and type in, any old publication, preferably like a community health one, and just read through a few abstracts to kind of get the hang of writing them. So then you'll have your keywords. Be creative with those, but though the idea there is you pick the keywords so that when people search for your paper, so later in your careers, when you're publishing lots of papers, if that's what you want to do, those keywords will get readership to your paper. So you want to make sure those are the words that would, that the content of your paper would fit into in a search. All right, so introductions. What I'll be looking for there is, kind of start off with a bang, right? You want to get somebody really interested in reading your paper. So some of you have started with a question, a rhetorical question, or a very shocking statistic. So just think about the first sentence to your paper. Think about like if you were reading a book and what would get you to keep reading. And you really want your introduction to be kind of like that. Also, I'm going to use Susie's paper just as an example. So she's talking about a health disparity across the whole country, but is specifically looking at a few case studies in different states. So if that's what you're doing in your introduction, make sure to tell the reader, although this looks at the health disparity throughout the US, I will specifically be focusing on Tennessee, New Hampshire, Montana, whatever states you're looking at. So use that space in the introduction. Then, as you move through the paper, here are a few things that I will be looking for. So one, that you're as specific as possible when you can be, also realizing that, you only have 12 pages to write. So what I mean by that is if you say, and I'm just pulling this a bit out of thin air, but let's say what you want to get across is individuals who have higher rates of obesity are more likely to suffer from adverse health outcomes. Now, if you say that to me, I would probably say, oh, like adverse health outcomes like what? Like, can you define what you mean? So that's what I mean by being more specific. So instead of saying what I just said, you could say individuals that have high rates of obesity are more likely to suffer from adverse health outcomes, such as high rates of hypertension, risk of type 2 diabetes, and let's say high cholesterol. So that's how you can take something like seemingly abstract where the reader's like, hi, I get what they're saying, but I wonder if they could be more specific, and tack on a few really descriptive words. So try to do that throughout the paper. So at this point, you all should have like a pretty solid rough draft. So I recommend reading through the whole thing and kind of highlighting sections that could get more specific. You could just add a sentence fragment or two to make a point more specific. All right, talk about citations real quick. So you when you're citing, just be sure to look at APA. I saw lots of, you guys are overall doing a really great job. There's just some little details, and I don't want you to lose points. I'm not going to deduct a lot of points, but I will be looking for that. So go back. There's documentation on D2L about proper citation. So just double check your citations and make sure you get into a good habit of citing works properly. One other trend that I sort of noticed is, this is a research paper, so big statements that you make should be backed up by research. So if you say something like suicide, or let's say you say Montana has the highest suicide rate in the country, right? We don't anymore, but we used to, and now I think we're about third. But I don't know that for sure, and I guess that's the point. So if you make a big claim like that, you need to cite the source from where you got that right after you're done. So right at the end of that sentence. Many of you were making pretty big claims, and I didn't see a citation until much later, and so I wasn't sure, did you get that information from that source, or had you moved on? And so I will be looking for that. On the flip side, many of you were citing the same research paper throughout an entire paragraph, sometimes into the second paragraph. So imagine reading something, and let's say I'm citing Carolyn Sufrin, right? And I'm talking about maternal health, and I'm saying something and then citing Sufrin, and then saying something and then citing Sufrin, and I'm going through. So as the reader, you wonder, that may be great information, but is the author synthesizing the information enough, or is the author kind of just reading through this and citing just, continuously from one source? So although I'm by no means am saying that anybody, is plagiarizing, that's not where I'm going. I just want to make sure that we're taking, with good research papers, you take a few bodies of research, you read them all, you synthesize what's going on, and then you make your argument. And so, really strong paragraphs will say, Sufrin argues that oftentimes women have a lot better maternal care behind bars, but, these other case studies say this and this, and so you're doing the work, you're doing the analysis and the synthesis, and that comes out in your final product. What else did I notice that I want to talk about? Figures, tables, charts, graphs. So we did that graphs and descriptions assignment for a reason. So when you insert your figure or table into your final paper, make sure to have a little description next to it, and that can be the description you turned in for that assignment. So you can kind of orient the graph to one side and then have a little box with the caption, or you can do it down below. Also, when you're writing the narrative, when you're writing your paper and you start talking about something that the reader can then look at in the figure, just write in your narrative like see figure 1 or see figure 2. So let's say you're talking about HIV rates among different ethnic groups. You could say there is a disparity, see figure 1, if figure 1 has something to do with, with the stats around that. Let's see. Okay, so I do want you to spend a significant amount of time on your recommendation section. So, I've read a lot of your rough drafts so far. Everything's looking, pretty spot on considering we still have 2 weeks left. For the professional recommendations, I want you to not only say, for example, mentoring is a great recommendation for lowering future health outcomes for people that grew up with a high ACE score. That's awesome. That's true. That's a great recommendation. It has been proven to be effective. But now tell me some instances where it's worked. So for example, in Alabama, there was a study where X amount of kids got mentored, so give me a little more in terms of what's the recommendation and how do we know it's a good one. And you can certainly provide a few different recommendations. Just make sure you provide enough content with each one. Now for your recommendations, really the sky's the limit. So you can say, just envision your community health worker, you have X and X budget. What would you do to reduce or minimize the disparity? And there I still want you to elaborate. So you won't get off the hook if you say, well, I'm not a community health worker, so I would rely on them. I mean, you've got to pretend a little bit in that section and tell me what you would do after all this research you've done to minimize the disparity you're talking about. So, this is just really, in terms of formatting, I do want 1.5 spacing. It's just easy to read, and don't include the title page or the bibliography in the page count. You can include everything else. And let's see, titles. Think of a good title. I'm not very good at titles, but it's always good to practice. And you can be catchy with the title, be creative, and put that right on your title page. And maybe just CHTH 428 Spring 2020 homework assignment. Not a catchy title. So think about the title a little bit. And I would say, although when I grade these, I don't know if you've all heard of the metaphor of the iceberg, right? So as professors, oftentimes, you look at this iceberg and the tip of the iceberg is all you can see, right? And oftentimes if a student doesn't really check for spelling and doesn't really check for grammar, it may be that you're so clouded by what you can see on the tip of the iceberg that you forget to really look at the content and everything that's like holding the entire thing up, the important part, right? So my point in telling you this is that I'm very aware that, spelling and grammar, I will deduct points, not a ton, right? Because I'm very much looking for the content, the substantive material, which is the bottom, bigger part of the iceberg. But I do really, really, really want you all to read through your papers with a fine-tooth comb and look for spelling mistakes. 2, 2, and 2, right? You should not be at this point in your college career messing up which 2 you're using. Punctuation, grammar, things like that. So if there's some grammatical mistake, goodness, I'll look for it. But if it's littered with them, then you'll really get some points off. So just be careful there. How far? Okay, 12 minutes. All right, I'm going to stop talking. I hope that is helpful. So again, you'll turn these in on D2L. You have until Wednesday the 6th at 5. You'll see the assignment folder kind of right below where you saw this video link. And please let me know if you have any more questions. I think I've gone over everything that came in through email. But again, I can always make another video if I get more questions. All right, take care, everybody, and have a great weekend.